See you
Good to
again.
see you as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So I lead marketing at Hallmark, which is based here in Kansas City, where I am today. And the pandemic was an interesting 20th anniversary, which is what I just had here with the company. So I've done a lot of different roles at Hallmark and am excited to have a chance to chat with you and everyone else today.
Excellent, excellent. And Chris, also so good to see you.
Yeah, nice to
In
see
different
you.
circumstances.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm Chris Brandt. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Chipotle. So I handle everything to do with marketing, digital, or culinary, all of that stuff. And I've been with the company about 2.5 years. I can't believe it's gone so fast, and certainly a lot of notable things have happened here in the last 6 months. But I hope this is the end. I hope we're approaching the end. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that things are going back to normal.
Absolutely. Well, I love, I think that you both, Chipotle and Hallmark, I can't think of any more, very consumer focused and centric brands that they're such a part of culture. They're such a part of people's everyday lives, right? And arguably there's emotional cores to both of those. So it's such a cool snapshot to have those two brands in conversation with us today. Martin, I'm sure you can sort of agree to that as well. I mean, it's fascinating when you think about how many brands are part of everybody's day-to-day lives, and certainly, businesses are dealing with brands every day that are just core to their business and how they operate. So, what are you looking forward to from this conversation today? And then we'll get into the framework in a second.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how Lindsay at Hallmark, particularly as that's a brand going through massive transformation, going from traditional into the digital world, and then also competing with something we thought greeting cards would have gone by the wayside, now seeing a return. So I'd like to hear that. And also, Chris, whether you've experienced an uptick in comfort eating and eating healthily too in your area, and how you've used that to double down on the areas that are growing using data, and then maybe backing off some of the areas that aren't growing quite so well. So those are some of the use cases I think for me personally would be interesting to learn from.
Absolutely. So I think what we want to do here, because I think it's going to be very helpful in sort of guiding this conversation and essentially framing this conversation for everybody listening. And that is this framework essentially that Martin, I know you have developed for certainly leading Teradata, but it's certainly something that you think has huge application to other companies. And we have a slide actually that visually brings that framework to life. So let's have that slide come up if we may. There we go. So, I think what this is this 3-phase approach, and I'm going to leave it to you, Martin, to sort of just give us the top line overview of this and how you think this breaks things down, and then from there we can dive into the 3 buckets. So.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Look, as a CMO, we have to really look at this in chapters, and bearing in mind we're going to something that we've never been through before. So we designed, number one was all about wellness, well-being, and making sure that we're authentic. And that was all about making sure our teams were safe, our customers and our partners were. And for us, really, then we switched very, very quickly. Those of you old enough can remember what a handbrake turn is. Felt like we were doing a handbrake turn at 80 miles an hour on black ice. So phase 1 was really respond. How do we respond to our customers, to our employees? Really then move very quickly into adapt. And for us was using data to see where our customers were thriving and the ones who are having problems. We leaned into both. And we'll come back to talking more about that. Then we really, as everyone else, shut down everything physical, moved dramatically to virtual, and then really had to make sure that we found new ways of working. And that was really in what we call phase 2, the adapt. And I think more or less we're still in that adapt phase. But as Chris was saying, I think we're seeing the green shoots of recovery here. And that's recognizing the signs of recovery. How do we make sure that we articulate the value that we deliver to our customers, for our customers, in a good way? And then really start to re-engage channels. And I think we've been also very cognizant not to be tone deaf and overtly promoting our brand through that. So the key message here is 3 phases: respond, that's behind us. We're sort of in between now, adapt and recover. And the key part of this and the theme of this conversation is how does data underpin everything we do in these three phases.
So why don't we start, I'd love for us to, because we have a moment here to talk about the respond phase. And so Lindsay and Chris, I'd love for you to just walk us through what the respond phase looked like for each of you.
Chris, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Okay, great. And you can fill in the blanks, Lindsay, where I'm in. But look, I think that everything pivoted. Right at the beginning of March, we just pivoted everything to digital. We had just actually launched a new queso, so everything was geared to that. We were really geared up to have a bunch of television advertising around the NCAA basketball tournament. All of that was canceled. So we just pivoted everything, and we tried to, see where the puck was going versus where it was, and pivoted a bunch of our media. So I think it really showed a lot of the agility and the creativity of our marketing group. I mean, I think that's where we really earned our money, because we really acted quickly. By the Monday of quarantine, we had kicked off digital initiatives. We called it Chipotle Together, to kind of bring people together over Zoom with some celebrities and influencers. We had pivoted all of our advertising towards free delivery and put free delivery on board because we knew people were trapped at home. And so, and it really leveraged, I think, a lot of the digital infrastructure that we had put in place over the last couple of years, because in the restaurant business, digital was where the growth was. And, it just, between, I think, the efforts that we did, and more importantly, people having to stay home and try digital and experiment with those things. We have a good app. We have mobile pickup shelves where we were still open, which was good, but you couldn't dine in. And then the delivery business and the digital business just took off. I mean, we've acquired more digital consumers than we lost from in-store, which I would have never guessed that would be possible. But I think that our challenge now, as you move into different phases, is to how do we hold on to those people as the in-restaurant business, creeps slowly back. But it's been an exciting time for us. I think that it's a tribute to the company as a whole and the strength of the company culture to be able to pivot so quickly. And, just for order of magnitude, our digital business at the end of 2019 made up about 20% of our sales. Today, it makes up just less than half. So it's just been a sea change, not only for our operators out at our 2,700 restaurants, but for folks at the headquarters and the digital infrastructure as well.
Well, and that'll be fascinating and I circle back to you in a little bit. We'll talk about the adapt and recovery phases for sure, because clearly those have big implications for where you're going to go now. Lindsay, talk about that first respond period for you, and sort of what had to happen, what happened internally at the company, and what did you feel was the right course of action?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I just have to say here at lunchtime that, Chris, I'm a super user of the Chipotle app, and I was very grateful for that in some of those early days. So those of you listening,
thank you. Please keep using Chipotle. My kids depend on it. Right.
Right. I'll give a shout out to the great experience of that. But anyway, similar to what Chris and Martin were saying, we had a lot of the same, kinds of really early pivots at Hallmark around thinking about, we had our own Hallmark stores. Many of them were in areas that had to be shut down. We have other important customers who, had a lot of different things going on. And so we did a lot of those things as well. Canceled some of our media, pivoted to digital. So think about me saying same for what Chris said, but I'll add just another little dimension and wrap it around one story and an example, maybe to bring a couple of things to life that I think gets into where consumer insight and data are married, kind of like Martin was saying, the art and the science. So in those first days, think, right before March Madness was canceled as like a frame of reference, we were talking about, like most brands were, what can we do to help and enter into the kind of conversation here in the U.S. In a way that's authentic to our brand? Again, one of the things that we were really talking about in the original insight, in that weeks and days to follow that kind of early mid-March time period, was just thinking about how many people were starting to be very isolated. That first tip of the spear was, our elder family members and friends in senior care centers as some of the first people to kind of have that physical connection shut off. So we really started to talk about how can we enter into this conversation? And that led us to say, let's really offer up a way for people to connect in a way that works in a distance fashion, which is a greeting card. So we actually, in the course of I think it was 10 days, had the concept and were live at the end of March with brand new creative assets, including video, social, digital, a full website. And I'll get into some amazing data capture that happened from that. But what we did was we just put out a call on a Friday to say, Hallmark's going to give away 1 million cards. No strings attached. Just come to our website, sign up. A pack of 3 cards will come to you. And our only ask is that you send those to people to help them feel more connected and not alone. And, I had a couple of examples here, some of the cards that we actually created, brand new creative, had socially distanced operators at our plants. I mean, it was a lot of cool stuff that happened. But like this one says, there's a surprising amount of love in this folded piece of paper, and it's all for you. Or new art we did that said, here's for you, or here for you, here for everything. We'll get through this. So we sent those cards out to people, and I'm telling you, when we offered to give away 1 million, that was, like I said, on Friday. By Friday evening, we were already almost out. And so in the moment, we added another 1 million. And every time someone would come to our site to get some of those, we were capturing data of people that are, of course, interested in our category. And similar to the bullet point you shared, Chris, about digital users, we rely on our Hallmark stores for Crown Rewards, our loyalty program memberships. And the great news is we actually were able to sign up more people to our loyalty program during this time, even with the majority of the stores closed, than we'd planned on because of this really authentic effort. So we repeated it, by the way, a couple of weeks later. We gave away another 2 million, but this positioning was around the inside of gratitude. And that was when, the cultural conversation was just such gratitude for healthcare professionals and, USPS mail carriers and, all the truck deliveries that showed up at our doorstep and teachers that kids were missing. So we did a pack of gratitude cards that were about, just how amazing you are. Hallmark Crayola is part of our Hallmark family, and we created one that kids could color. It says, not all heroes wear capes. So that's just one story of that first phase of Adapt. And like Martin was saying, it was a crazy late nights figuring out every operational detail. But from that, we were able to enter into an authentic conversation, spend our dollars not on, irrelevant things, but on something that was extremely timely, leverage our in-house creative, and get a lot of loyalty members signed up in the meantime. So that was probably the big story of that first phase for Hallmark.
You all just in the nature of your business, you have to always have a finger on the pulse of the cultural conversation, to your point. That's how you create your product, right? And it's so nuanced, so getting that right always has to be right, certainly in your product offering and in literally the phrasing that you put on your cards. But now things are happening and changing and transforming so rapidly, and that temperature is, we all lived through it. It was just such a, constantly feeling constant change every day. And this is a question for you, Lindsay, but certainly it's also for Chris. How much, if we're talking about data, the data was informing what you what you were choosing to do, but how much of this also was the intuition that you were bringing, the art and science, and sort of how did that mix manifest? I'm sure that mix always manifested even prior to 2020, but certainly now in this period, how would you articulate how that worked? Do you know what I mean? That mix of intuition and data and bringing all these sort of inputs together to create what you felt was the right product for the right time.
Yeah, good question. And I think the simplest answer is, our mix of art and science at Hallmark just depends on the situation. And in this particular situation, that was extremely quick and as radical of change in the shortest period of time that I think any of us have seen in a while, that it was a lot of intuition. It was a lot of listening and understanding and thinking empathetically through what people were going through, and we were all living in our own lives. And so that particular initiative started off with a lot of the art and a lot of the intuition that is also, though, formed from the collective files of watching and studying social and interpersonal communication for several years, though, that kind of gave you that starting place to be intuitive. But then other things that we've done since and continue to do sometimes lean more heavily into data. And so as we've thought about our digital acceleration, we were already on a digital transformation path, but our digital acceleration has been largely consumer-led and informed by data, because the great news about digital is you have so much real-time data at your fingertips. And so it depends on the situation, but we believe heavily in art, and we believe heavily in science and data, and just we're not afraid to leap on intuition, but at that same time, we also believe that the more data you have, you can also kind of have that pulse with the consumer. So it depends on the situation, but the first initiative there in Adapt phase was a lot of intuition.
And Chris, I know historically, throughout your career, you believe in the power of data. Digital transformation is something that defines you as a CMO. But through this period, again, how would you think, specific to the Respond period, how were you thinking about what do we need to be paying attention to, essentially as humans, as empathetic listeners, to Lindsay's point, and how much do we need to be, looking for new data sources and really following that kind of data to guide us forward? Just talk about the mix.
Yeah, as Lindsay mentioned, and as you mentioned too, Jenny, I think every week it seemed like the consumer psyche was undergoing a change that previously would take a year, right? And so, right at the beginning, it was about connection because people were isolated. And then it was, as Lindsay mentioned, it was sort of a thank you. So we did, burritos for healthcare heroes, and we started putting, because that's what people wanted to hear. They wanted to hear, not necessarily, it wasn't a time to sell, it was a time for your brand to show its values and humanity. And I think in a time of trouble, it was great to be on a brand like Chipotle, where our values are to cultivate a better world. And so we just started to try to act like the brand was a person. And so we wanted to thank healthcare heroes. We did that stuff. Then we went through a phase where people were worried about safety. And so then all of a sudden we pivoted to a message about, hey, they wanted to know, are the restaurants safe and are the employees healthy? And so actually at Chipotle, it was interesting because we got a chance to talk about a lot of the industry-leading food safety things that we had put in place in the past, because we had some well-publicized troubles around 2015, 2016. All of a sudden, we're getting a chance to talk about food safety, and an Ipsos survey told us, hey, consumers thought we were the safest restaurant they could go to. So it gave us a chance, I think, to talk about a lot of things about the brand's values, but we were just really trying to measure consumers versus third-party polls like the Harris poll, and also our own brand tracker, just to feel like what was the psyche. I think the other big piece was the pivot to digital. And so, we doubled down on our investments in social and digital media. Like Lindsay, we had a huge boost in our loyalty membership too. We had 8 million loyalty members at the end of 2019. Today, we have more than 15 million. And so that's a real rich data source for us to continue to leverage and to push out. With 15 million people, that's more than Monday Night Football viewership. So all of a sudden, all of those things that maybe a decade ago in marketing is going to be a publisher. You're going to have, I never really believed it, but all of a sudden we had it. And so, we've got an ability to push out those messages to a really engaged group. This is a database that isn't, our loyalty program is about a year and a half old. It's not like some ancient database. This is, 15 million people inside of about 18 months. And so, it's really a valuable tool for us to measure what's going on and what people respond to. And but I think that understanding the consumer and doing research, whether it's brand trackers and looking at, and our whole digital philosophy was, we were doing all kinds of different creative, but we call it survival of the fittest. And there's no emotion. And if that creative works, we pour the gas to it. If it doesn't, we'll pivot away to something else. And I think trying to just maximize those things all the time. It's a continuous basis. We're looking at all of those digital ads literally on a weekly basis to see what's resonating and what isn't. And, we'll pivot away or try something else as it goes. And so I think that's where, that for marketing, I think there used to be that old adage that said, half your marketing money is wasted. You just don't know which half. It's just not true anymore. There's a measurement you can put of everything. And as you mentioned too, look, there's art and science. And just because you can measure it doesn't mean it's great. And just because you can't measure it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But I think putting all those pieces together and coordinating the orchestra of all the different channels, I think that was really just key during the recover phase, and as you got into that adapt phase, and kind of reaching a new norm.
So
Jenny,
Martin,
can I add on to that?
Absolutely.
That Chris said about marketers becoming publishers, and I think going back to my comment on science and art of marketing, I also think it's underpinned by, and we spoke before about this, the new CMO during this pandemic had to have a cool head and a warm heart. And I think Lindsay's stories were outstanding. And I think for us, we became literally not only publishers, but we became broadcasters and educators, all within a telescoped time frame. And I think also to Lindsay and Chris's points, we lent into our customers. And this wasn't about looking good, it's about doing good. And we showed up for every one of our customers, be they people benefiting from the pandemic, because people did, but also leaning into those customers, the rental cars, the hotels, the airlines, lent into them too. We offered preferable terms. We offered more resources. We offered them consultants. We also offered them free education. And like Chris and Lindsay, I wish I had a few million on some of my numbers in terms of people, but we saw our database double during this size because we proactively said, we will help educate you to get the most of the data, to help you get back on the feet and help you recover the other side. So I really do like to hear those stories that the Hallmark spot on. I think also Chris and that transition they made to digital was absolutely the way to go.
Well, cool-headed, warm heart. I'm writing that down for my end-of-year review. I'm going to be putting that on there, so I really like that phrase. That's great.
So let's now move to certainly the adapt phase, because I mean, I think, and Martin, perhaps you can remind us again in articulating the specifics of that phase, but certainly it's getting to it. I hate to use the term new normal, but it's starting to see what's sticking, right, as we move forward.
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, the adapt part is really understanding, and once all of the just getting stuff done phase, and now taking a step back in HowlRed, Excel, Blue, was really looking at the markets we served. And we did a pretty quick segmentation analysis using data to say, out of all of our businesses, we saw about 9 to 10% of our business really, really hurt through pandemic, the rentals, the hospitality, the airlines. And we made certain specific programs around them. And then also we really, as Chris and Lindsay both said, we absolutely turned to digital. And the other one thing that was really successful for us was our briefing centers, where we'd fly people into San Diego or one of our hub offices. That was gone. And then we transformed very quickly into a virtual executive briefing center. And they have gone gangbusters. And it's enabled us to tell our story, but then also to understand our customers' needs and also understand if they have issues and challenges going through this pandemic, how we can respond to that. And I think the whole message here that I'm learning from Chris and Lindsay is that agility. Who would have known 5 months? We would have seen so much transformation, so much come at us, but then also you see the people rise to that. My team, I'm so proud of, have actually gone through this, and also the people at Teradata really have lent into this, but really focused on doing it with a cool head, warm heart, being authentic, and all about doing good first versus looking good. And the good news is that loyalty is already showing up in our business. And kudos for our customers for coming back and staying loyal with us through that and recognizing where we did good. So that's how I'm seeing phase 2 in the adapt period.
So obviously we'd love to hear, Lindsay and Chris, what's resonating for you, and how you would characterize your adapt periods. And I liken it to sort of, the looking around after the hurricanes pass and sort of looking around to see what's there, what's not, what's different, what's permanent, and what was temporary. So Lindsay, perhaps you can share a little perspective on that.
Sure. Just a few little anecdotes, but maybe a mental framing first. I think, Jenny, you've heard me talk about this in a personal story, but I apply it to work as well. This notion that I love to think about called a hidden advantage, which is what are some good things that can come from some really hard times or challenges when you're in the heat of the storm, if you have a moment to reflect. And I think some of that is akin to this adapt phase. Like, what are the pieces that you learned because you had to in that first phase that now you think, gosh, this might actually be a better way to move forward? And then what are the pieces that you just really hope go away? But I'll focus on the hidden advantage parts. A couple of things. One is, for our Hallmark stores, we have a very important segment of the business that's our keepsake ornament business. It has a very avid consumer base and just a beautiful product line, and it's just a really great part of our portfolio. Well, every summer, usually in July, we have a big event called Ornament Premiere. It's very much something that consumers look forward to, and it's a huge opportunity for the retailers during that time period. Well, of course, some stores were still closed. A majority of them were open. But if you think about an event that has people lined up outside the door for the doors to open, that doesn't work well. And the 6-foot stickers weren't going to cut it. And it isn't necessarily a curbside event either, because some people really wanted to touch and feel and see the line. So our team, like Martin said, I'm so proud of our team. They had these amazing ideas that couldn't be fully tested or vetted. We just had to go with them and jump in. And they were things like contacting, some of our best shoppers and setting up individual shopping appointments. And that was to spread people out. But man, talk about feeling loved and cared for when you get like a, VIP shopping experience. And what was normally done in a day, we spread out over a week. And then, of course, the e-commerce piece, Hallmark.com, served a huge chunk of that for people who just really weren't comfortable, entering into the store environment. And the results were fantastic, huge. I mean, we actually sold more than we did the prior year, which was a huge year. And we never, ever would have guessed that. And so now we're asking ourselves, what do VIP events look like in this, go forward phase? How can we adapt to add that to our toolbox? So that's one example. Another brief one is we have on our website, on Hallmark.com, of course, a lot of direct to consumer, but also a lot of curbside or buy online, pick up in store, all of those kinds of services. And we figured out a lot of things in our playbook, including things like some of our Hallmark stores that when they were closed in those early days actually learned how to become a dark store overnight, because they are the fulfillment centers for a lot of our e-commerce products. And so they figured that out, and it was a great way to kind of keep to pay the bills and keep employees engaged, but also to fill all that demand. So there are things that we learned from that, and as we're continually tracking the power of digital and e-commerce. So those are just a couple of examples, once again, trying to wrap some of these insights around stories. But I keep challenging from a leadership perspective, myself, my kids, and my team at Hallmark to say, what are those hidden advantages? Look for them, and how can they make us better?
So Chris, and I have to admit, having this discussion now does make me hungry when I think about Chipotle.
Perfect.
True.
I should have gotten my burrito before this call, but talk a little bit about how you're thinking about this adapt phase.
Yeah, look, our hidden advantage is what we call the digital kitchen. And so, and it's kind of, we actually call it our superpower, because within almost every Chipotle, there's a whole other make line that's just dedicated to digital orders. And that's something that we had in there in the past, but was never digital. And so by digitizing that, those digital orders never competed with the front line. But the rise of digital and that going from 20% of our business to 50% of our business and almost tripling in volume meant that the people inside the restaurant, all of a sudden accuracy became a big deal. At the front line, accuracy isn't, because you're following your burrito or your bowl right down the line and you just point what you want. But all of a sudden accuracy is a big deal. So that's a whole other skill level and a whole other measurement protocol that we have to put in place. I think from a marketing standpoint, we wanted to educate people on having a digital kitchen and all the different functionality in our app, because the app experience, if you go on our website, is very similar to going down the line. And it's really easy and it's easy to set up. And so we had to do some creative in a scrappy way. And we used a lot of editing of old spots that we had and re-edit them and combine them in different ways. And I think what it taught us is, look, we were already really scrappy, as you know, Jenny, that's sort of, kind of my thing. but we really demonstrated, I think, to our agencies as well, hey, we don't have to spend $1 bazillion to make a quality spot and to make a good spot. And I think then on the digital side, our relationships with our creative there, we were doing all kinds of different things to just educate the consumer. And we've always been an experiment culture. And it just, as Lindsay was talking about, we just were willing to try a lot of things. And, it's not failure if you learn something, and we'll start small. And, the Chipotle Together worked really well. So we kept going on that. And I think that the other big thing was, going back to what Martin said about a warm heart, I think that able to show the brand how we cared. And, the one thing we haven't, touched on was we had a global pandemic, and then we had also all the issues of racial unrest and inequality and those things. And so, the brand did a lot of things. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we turned our app into a donation site. So we call it Roundup for Real Change. So we made donations to organizations like Thurgood Marshall College Fund and National Urban League, but we also enabled you to round up via our app. So round up your order to the nearest dollar. And we were raising like $200,000 to $250,000 a week, literally 45 cents at a time off those things, because people were telling us, hey, they want a way to donate. I think the biggest complaint we got, I can't donate more, on the app versus just Roundup. So I think the brand being able to do some of those things and kind of measure the pulse of what's going on, and sort of when you get in a ditch, like we were, there aren't any sacred cows anymore. So you can try a lot of different things. And, we hired a bunch of people that we felt were very entrepreneurial. We had a very, kind of almost a startup mentality over the last few years as we've kind of gone on this reawakening of Chipotle. And it really paid huge dividends for us. And, I think that those examples of putting the Roundup in there, we integrated Uber Eats and Grubhub into our system for third-party marketplace deliveries during the pandemic. Those things would have taken a lot longer, had it been not in an urgent need. And so I think the ability to just keep getting things done is a tribute to the culture and a tribute to the company. And again, as Lindsay said, hey, let's just, above all else, do something. And I think that a lot of those things worked, and I think it'll really inform a lot of the way we operate going forward.
Well, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but I'm just mindful of time. I want to remind the audience that if you do have questions for the panelists, please submit them via Slido, and I can take a look at those and I'll present them to our panelists here. But before we get to recovery phase, because ultimately at the end of the day, growth is the name of the game. I mean, obviously we need to all be figuring out how to move forward and how to continue to grow in our new reality. But just to the points that you were making, and any of you, please chime in. But Martin, I know you and I were talking about this prior to the call. It obviously begs the question: what's the role of CMO in all of this? Certainly when it comes to the data, the data collection, insights, ownership. And certainly the things that need to happen inside the company to enable the sharing of data in new ways, perhaps sort of. The finally breaking down for any silos that had existed or have, traditionally existed in an organization. You could almost characterize the CMO as a sort of quarterback in that regard. So thoughts around this and maybe perhaps some experiences, short examples of experiences that you all have had in terms of just your role in all of this and certainly related to the data component.
Yeah, I think for us, I think to both Chris's and Lindsay's point, we moved from a ready, aim, fire to ready, aim, fire, and sometimes ready, fire, aim. I think this tri-storming notion, and for us, leaning into the recovery period, there are things that we've done now using data. We have a social responsibility group and teams called Teradata Cares, and our motto is doing good with data. Underpinning that doing good with data, we saw there's around the world, around the nation, there's about 50 primary databases all dealing with COVID. We brought all of those together and then also put some our best industry and business consultants on that and an analytics front end, and it's now called Return to Work, COVID-19 Return to Work, and it helps our customers do scenario planning. When is it good to bring people in, even down to zip code areas? And what we're doing is we're offering that free to every one of our customers. And Lindsay, you're one of our customers, access available to you too. But what that's doing is doing good with data. This is, again, free of charge to our customers to help them come back to the new normal and do so in a planned out period, but with the well-being of their employees at the center of that and the well-being of their customers. So underpinning all of that, of course, is data, and that's really why we call it doing good with data.
So for Chris and Lindsay, I mean, how have you as marketing leaders thought about or rethought about how you need to sort of lead your organizations forward with that at the core? Has it changed conversations you're having internally? Has it sort of changed alliances? What's happening from even just a process and team standpoint?
Yeah, look, I think the way, the way we're organized and now the needs, I mean, this has accelerated our digital growth 3 or 4 years into the future for sure. I mean, we never thought we would be, 6 months on. In 2019, we doubled our digital business and we're at 20% of revenue. And all of a sudden we're sitting here at almost half. And so it just changes a lot of what we have to do. I think one of the questions you kind of asked us in the prepared materials before, just to kind of get us thinking about it, Jenny, was, how do you talk about, how do you make investments in infrastructure and in the different jobs? How do you justify that, when you in the midst of everything else? And I think that a lot of those things, like people to do pricing, more people to kind of look at the different journeys that we have in terms of our CRM and loyalty, because all of a sudden, we've got 15, 16 million people in that program and we only had 8. The even small changes in efficiency and effectiveness of those programs now pay big dividends. So I think that the importance of digital really is changing. There's a lot of pressure on budgets. Look, I'm measuring everything. Here's the returns we're getting. Okay, I see it. I buy it. With the CTO, there's constantly different changes and priorities on the roadmap about what you want. I mean, their ability to get the Roundup for Real Change function going in record time was amazing. And so I think that it's almost a much more constant dialogue than it was before. But I think it's just, that's the way you're going to have to operate for the foreseeable future. So we talked about the adapt phase being, I mean, it sounds like, well, there's the recover and then there's the adapt, but adapt is a verb. I mean, there's no finish line to all this stuff. And I think that we're learning so much more about how to engage that consumer. And we have a responsibility to try to engage them to keep that frequency up, that it really changes for the better a lot of the ways we work. And I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, I went to UCLA Business School, so John Wooden quotes are big, but things work out best for those that make the best of the way things work out. I think, I'm a half full kind of person. I hope our organization is a half full kind of organization. And I think that, we've shown that so far. And I think it's a huge opportunity for us to get ahead and really set ourselves up for, not only just the next 6 to 12 months, but, years in the future for sure.
Lindsay, your thoughts? How has this changed you and as a leader yourself? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, sure. Lots of good quotes today. I love the adapt as a verb, but it makes me think of my favorite John Wooden quote. If I get it right, the good, better, best. Good, better, best, never rest until the good are better and the better best. That's like the adapt is a verb for sure. So similar to what's been said, we at Hallmark have actually always been big believers in data and investing in consumer data and everything that goes around that. So we were already on this journey, and this year has just accelerated that dramatically and been able to show more application sooner. And so the specifics continue to require, but the